let's dive into this Alabama Crimson Tide 2024 season. And man, was it something for sure. And I'll leave it at that. So they opened up with Western Kentucky, beat them 63-0 as they should. Opened up with South Florida this time. It was 42-16. The year before when they played South Florida, it was a little closer than that. Then they took on Wisconsin and beat them 42-10. That was an awesome game to watch. We three were together. Minus, well, I guess Bryson was not with us, but the three of us were together watching that game. It was fun to watch.
Unless you're a Badger.
Yeah. And then I did not expect this. Then they took on a number 2 Georgia in Tuscaloosa and beat them 41-34. Now, you can say that score was pretty close, but if you looked at that score at halftime, it was ugly. Georgia was way behind. They clawed their way back and got into the game. At one point, I think they took the lead, but Alabama surpassed them at the end of the day. I don't think that happens this year. You got to come to Athens, but I'm sure you and I can get into that. And then
it's going to come up in our conversation for sure because I've got thoughts on that game.
Yeah, I'm sure. And then you went to Nashville, and y'all must have partied too hard or something.
I think they probably hit Broadway a little too hard the night before.
I think so.
We said that. Stay away from Broadway. That was in that show.
It was.
I'm wondering if like PBR was in town that week or something like that. There had to be something going on. That's bull riding or some rodeo girls there or something. I don't know what was going on.
It wasn't good, and Jalen Milroe did not do what he was supposed to do, and you guys lost 40-35.
So let's back up. I think you want to get to Vanderbilt, but we got to talk about this Georgia game, right? Don't we? Don't we have to talk about it?
Yeah, we'll get there in a second.
We'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah. Simmer down, buddy. Simmer down. I know you're anxious.
Talk about Vandy, but okay, I'll wait. Go ahead.
And then you took on South Carolina Gamecocks. You beat them 27-25, 2-point game. It was close. That was an exciting game to watch. Then you went to Knoxville and took on Tennessee, a number 11 Tennessee at the time, and
Nico.
The Fighting Nicos, and you lost 24-17. I don't think that was as ugly of a loss as a Vanderbilt. I do not.
Well, that game wasn't decided until the fourth quarter, so it was a close game all the way through.
Tennessee was a hard game. They were pretty good last year for sure. Then you took on the evil one. You bounced back and you took on a number 21 Mizzou, and you beat them 34-0. Drinkwitz has nothing when it comes to the Alabama Crimson Tide. He can't use his voodoo with you guys. Then this was shocking to me as well. You went to Baton Rouge. We talked about this game last week when we were recapping LSU's season. And you went to Baton Rouge, played at night, and Jalen Milroe showed up, man.
Good Jalen showed up. That's right.
He sure did. He showed up and beat them 42-13. Then you took on Mercer and you beat them 52-7, as you should. Then Norman. Norman. You went to Norman, Oklahoma, and old Small Hands Milroe took a bad loss, man. A bad loss, 24-3. Not a good look at all. Especially Oklahoma's season. You know, we recapped them like, I don't know, a year ago. We were doing the recap shows. That's how far down they were. And they were able to pull out a win, a big win against the Crimson Tide. Then the Iron Bowl showed up, and you guys beat them 24. You beat Auburn 24-14. Auburn had that was a good game for Milroe. and then your bowl game.
Mm-hmm. I remember it well.
All I got to say is one thing. You had one job. You had one job to beat Michigan, a Big Ten school, and you lost 19-13. Again, not a good look.
No, it wasn't great.
But 9-3 season, regular season, 9-4 with the bowl game. You guys, along with Ole Miss and South Carolina, were in the talks for a 16-team playoff. In a couple, I mean, I don't know, man. But anyway, I'm going to just turn this over to Senior Chief, man. You tell us what you thought of your Crimson Tide's season.
Well, you can't take it in a vacuum here. You got to take all the information in, and the first thing that you have to talk about is that it was a coaching change, right? So you have to consider how the season went in the context of what all was going on. And when you replace someone like Nick Saban, it's not just going to be like you're throwing more wood on the fire and it just keeps on humming. The train keeps rolling down the track. There's going to be some bumps. Now, let's just start with the Wisconsin game because it was the first big game they had, and so everybody was really interested in how that game was going to go. And to everyone's surprise, everything went well. They were rolling that whole game. Jalen Milroe had a good game. The defense looked really good that game. What'd you say the score was? 42-13?
42-10.
42-10. Yeah. So it was never really even in question, especially once the second half started. So
they took out the starting quarterback for Wisconsin that ball game as well.
They put him out, and there's always a question of would it have been closer if he had been in. Maybe, but they looked pretty hungry that day, and they played well. So I don't think it would have made that much of a difference. People may disagree with that, but so when the season started, we were feeling pretty good that we had enough good players, and DeBoer, has a proven past. He had just finished coaching in the national championship game, so it's not like he was just some nobody. So there was some, he came in with some expectation, but early on it was looking good, and you guys were there. In fact, we went from watching the Wisconsin game to that great Georgia game against Kentucky, which was not so great. But
it was ugly.
It was ugly, and we had a nervous Dawg sitting on the edge of the couch, wanting us to get out of the room because he couldn't take it anymore. So,
and I'm very thankful that y'all left me alone. Very thankful.
I think we really thought they were going to lose, but at the time, we were feeling pretty good about the Tide. And then we had a 2-week break, and I got a little story. I just so happened that the Georgia game came when my son was on fall break, and we were taking our family trip to Boston. So I had the pleasure of watching the Georgia-Alabama game this year in a hotel bar with a bunch of Bostonians in downtown Boston, and it was great. In fact, there was one Alabama grad who was from Boston watching it with me, and then there was just like a huge crowd of, made you kind of think about Cheers, the TV show, just a bunch of regulars there watching this football game with me. And it was just stunning how hard Alabama came out against Georgia in that game. It looked like they were just on two different levels of football. Jalen Milroe was throwing perfect passes, wide open receivers all over the field. Georgia looked confused. So you might imagine that we got a little bit over our skis because of that game. Like we started thinking that we could win any game, which I think they probably could have, but
it's funny that you mentioned the Cheers environment, because then the following week you go with the Bars of Broadway meets Sesame Street. So tell me about your feelings about that game. Hebert.
Well, so I was in Boston, and that game was, if y'all recall, was an 11 o'clock game. Now, Alabama fans hate 11 o'clock games, and do you want to know why?
The hangover.
Can you guess? Well, not only the hangover is definitely there, but Alabama doesn't play in a lot of 11 o'clock games. All their games are prime time. They're big games. They always usually get for Central Time here it's 2:30, or they get the 6:30 game. For you guys, it would be 3:30 or 7:30. They just don't play in a whole lot of 11 o'clock games. And I think Uncle Kenny called 11 o'clock Gamecock prime time, right? And that's because that's usually the Gamecock spot. That's where they play football games, at 11 o'clock. That's not where Alabama plays football. And so you can go back historically. Someone should check my facts on this. And there's underperformance in every 11 o'clock Bama game. You can just check the record. They play poorly in 11 o'clock games. And you saw it that week against Vanderbilt. Now, I was at the airport trying to watch it on my computer. And then, fortunately, my flight had Wi-Fi, so I finished it on Wi-Fi. And it just wasn't pretty. Like, they couldn't stop Pavia. Like, he was just doing whatever he wanted to do.
Ernie.
Defense looked confused, couldn't stop the run. Jalen, I mean, that was like the first time this year that we saw bad Jalen, and it was like, well, maybe this was an aberration, right? What's the
He's got small hands.
He's blaming the small hands.
Small hands.
But it was a big shock to the system, and as everybody knows by now, the first time in 40 years, Bama goes down to Vanderbilt in Nashville, tear down the goalpost, take them to the Tennessee, or maybe that was the Cumberland River. They took it to the Cumberland River and threw it in the river, right? So
40 years.
It wasn't good. Yeah, 40 years.
Do you think that there was a conspiracy in the SEC office when they put out the scheduling to have you with a noon kick?
Well, like I said, Central Time, that's 11 o'clock our time, so it's even worse.
This is what I'm saying.
No, I don't really believe in conspiracies like that. I think they expected Alabama to go down there and hang 55 and give up maybe 7, and that people would be tuning out, so they wanted to get it over with. And I think there were some big games that day too. What were the afternoon games that week? I can't remember.
Dude, I have no idea.
We'll have to get.
I got you. Give me a second. I got you.
Yeah, check that. I guess that would have been in week 4 or 5.
6.
I do remember that when we got home after flying all day, we finally got home, and the Cal Miami game. I was able to watch the Cal Miami game second half because
Georgia may have been playing Ole Miss that week. I think they were.
Georgia was playing Auburn. Tennessee was playing Arkansas. Ohio State was playing Iowa. Penn State was playing UCLA. Nothing crazy. The only two teams that were really ranked playing each other were Texas A&M and Missouri.
Well, that would have been bigger than
not a
Bama,
great
Vanderbilt.
week.
Yeah. But anyway, I'm sure they were expecting a blowout in the league office, and they really got it, except for it went the other way. I'm sure their television ratings really, anytime Bama's losing, TV ratings go up. So, But I don't think it was a conspiracy. It was just a bad week.
And then your next game, you took on what you like to refer to as the Shamecocks.
Shamecocks. Well, I spent a little time in Columbia, so I have a little history with the Gamecocks.
You have a special relationship with the Gamecocks. That's right.
Don't tell anybody this, but they are my second team in the SEC. But I don't put that out publicly.
I thought that was Georgia.
We're on a podcast. Oh yeah. No, so I do kind of like the Gamecocks, and in fact, I took my son to that game. We actually watched it here. And what time was that game? Do you know what time that game kicked?
I believe that was a noon kick also.
That was an 11 o'clock kick because we're on Central Time over here.
Those of us in civilization.
That's right.
Way out here in Central Time Zone, that game kicked at 11, and I drove my son down there. It's a short drive from here, so we went down to watch the game. And the same rule applied. Alabama doesn't really do well in 11 o'clock games, so if you want to catch them, you got to catch them at 11. And it was like, once again, Jalen was stuck in the mud. He couldn't do anything. He was slow. He was late on his throws. Defense actually played pretty well. Gave up a couple of big plays, namely the biggest one being at the end of the game when it looked like they had it put away. And what's your quarterback's name? What's
Lenora Sellers. Yeah.
Lenora Sellers.
You sound like Ohio State guy.
Yeah, seriously. Hey, Lenora Sellers threw that 50-yard bomb right, perfectly placed corner of the end zone, tied up. Or no, not tied up. They would have been up by 2, and then they recovered the onside kick. I mean, it was just a calamity of errors just kept happening, and it was kind of hard to watch. But it was a fun game. After we had won, it was a pretty fun game, to have been at. And I know the chicken. I think he said last week that he thought that they would have won that game if it had been in Columbia. I think you're underestimating the Tide prestige, but okay.
I think we would have. I think we would have won that game at Billy Bryce. I think that game. What's funny about that game? You talk about how Alabama notoriously does not do that well on 11 o'clock. I'll give you that Central Time Zone kick. Carolina, had that game been at Billy Bryce, it would have been a 7:30 kick. That would have been a night game for Carolina. So you would have had the perceived advantage of a primetime kick for Alabama, but I just feel like Sandstorm would have been too much for you that night.
It's funny you bring that up because I think I've been in almost every game that Bama's played at Williams-Brice, and I'm going back to 2000. I'm thinking that would have been 1 or 2. I think it was 2001, maybe 2. I can't remember which. Either way, Tyler Watt, quarterback at Alabama, taking on, I think it may have been Lou Holtz still, or maybe Spurrier at Carolina.
That would have been Holtz. So you're probably playing against Phil Petty under center that day.
And that was the Dennis Franchione offense at Alabama, and that was the head coach at Alabama at the time. And they went in there, and Carolina beat them, and the goalpost came down in Williams-Brice. And then the 2011 game with, the most stacked team Alabama's ever had with Julio Jones and Mark Ingram, just a loaded roster.
And an unloaded Steven Garcia.
Day. This is
he was probably loaded.
No, I think he was about as sober as he could have been that day. Now, he was definitely plastered out of his mind after.
Right. And like being there, watching the throws that he was making and the throws that they were coming down with, it was just unreal, like perfectly placed. He's never had a game like that. That was the best game he's ever played. It hadn't happened before then, and it didn't happen after that.
Right.
So it was just remarkable to watch. And once again, goalposts come down. But then I came in, what would that have been, 2018 or 2019?
19, I think, when we went together, yeah.
Yeah, and we watched Henry Ruggs, who's now in Las Vegas Penitentiary. And
did he go to Georgia?
No, yeah, he must have gotten kicked off at Georgia. No, but then we also had why am I forgetting names? I'm on the podcast. Alabama players hurdling the Gamecocks for touchdown. What was that? What's the running back's name?
Is it Brian Robinson that year?
No, it wasn't Brian. It was the one that plays for Pittsburgh now.
Najee Harris.
Najee Harris.
Yep,
yeah. He was hurdling South Carolina's secondary, carrying people into the end zone. That game was remarkable because how many points they probably could have scored. I think they ended up scoring 50 points, but it looked like they could have scored 80.
It was a long day. It was a long day.
Tua was dropping dimes that game.
I thought you said it was going to be remarkable because you were with your buddy, the chicken, but.
Well, that was also great. We actually, we took I took Wade and he brought Bailey, his son. It was a great time.
Yeah.
But the goalpost did not come down in Williams-Brice that day. So I thought we finally broke the Williams-Brice curse. So who knows what would have happened if that game would have been there. We'll find out this year, I suppose.
That's true. And I would imagine that'll be either a 3:30 or a 7:30 kick.
It's going to be up there because, Lenore Sellers is going up with all his Heisman hype, which we're going to have a talk about sometime. I think you got a problem in South Carolina. You don't even know it yet. But so that game.
That's just poor talk because he didn't transfer.
Look, real quick before we go to, because there's a couple of the games I want you to touch on real quick. But before we do, I have a public service announcement.
Mm-hmm.
You ready? And I need Kirby Smart to listen to me. So when we play Alabama this year, we need to play at noon. Give us every chance possible to win that game.
That's your only chance.
Please.
Well, they have a 17-year-old receiver, so we're cooked already. That game was just some of the most phenomenal highlights I've ever seen in my life.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
It's unbelievable. That especially the catch at the end.
Wait a minute. Is he still at Alabama?
Oh,
you mean Ohio State hasn't bought him out yet?
That'll be next year.
Yeah, that'll probably happen for sure. And one other thing I want to say, man, because you brought up DeBoer and you brought up having to follow Nick Saban, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've said this over and over on the show over the last year, man. I think Nick Saban was the greatest coach of all time. No doubt. He is the GOAT when it comes to coaching. And nobody can argue with that. I think Kirby has the opportunity to get close, but he's got a long ways to go before he gets there, right?
Right.
I think it's too hard. I think the pressure for DeBoer was too hard. It's just too much to have to follow that. Now, can he overcome this year? We'll wait and see, and we can talk about that later. But I think you have to give DeBoer a little bit of credit coming in and taking that mantle, which was Nick Saban's Crimson Tide. I think that's hard.
Really hard. And you saw some of it. The thing about it is that, he not only took over for Nick Saban, but he took over for Nick Saban in the transfer portal era and also the NLI era. So there's more than just considerations of who do I have and who, coming in there and doing. He's got to be able to keep all those players. So he basically spends his entire spring and summer recruiting his own players, and that's, with the players he kept, I think he did a pretty good job. I mean, that's, I don't think they had too many defections.
I think losing to Caleb Downs was a huge impact to your defense.
I think it was too, but if you're playing the game, the statistics game or the numbers game, a safety is not adding that many points per game to your team. They do like intangibles and stuff like that, but I just don't know that I don't know that they win any more games with him on there. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but I don't think it would have been much different. Not with the safety.
Maybe not. Now, I want you to talk to me about the LSU game that you played in Baton Rouge at night, and you beat them 42-13.
That wasn't the Tennessee game came between then, right?
No, well, yeah, the Tennessee happened
Tennessee and Missouri.
So yeah, we can skip Tennessee and Missouri. Those were close games. I mean, those games went kind of as expected. Tennessee was a close game, and it could have gone either way at the end there. I thought they did pretty good.
Mizzou was a blowout.
Mizzou was a blowout, which was great to watch because everybody likes to watch Eli get his lunch handed to him.
That's right.
That's right.
So then you get to LSU.
The dark one speaks.
That's right.
But the thing that sticks out in my head about that LSU game the most is, and I think they did it. I think the coaching staff was trying to kind of send a shot over the bow of Brian Kelly down at LSU, but about midway through the fourth quarter, the entire offensive coordinator staff up in the booth walks down onto the field. Like they're not even calling plays anymore.
Oh my!
Wow.
Like during the game, like they left the booth where they call plays from, and they walked down onto the field to be a part of like the on-field celebration of going and handing it to them down in Death Valley. And I'll never forget that. Like even at that point, after having lost to Vandy and Tennessee, I think Bama fans were thinking, "Oh, we're in a good shape right here. Like this is." Like Jalen's going to be able to take us there, and so we still all had that feeling.
And then you went to Norman,
and this. So I think about this a good bit too. But Uncle Kenny, the guy who writes in for you guys, wrote that week about Florida, Mississippi. Excuse me, it would have been Mississippi. Who was it? Three. It was Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee were all in deep trouble that week, right?
Yep,
I think that was the three. And he was right. He said any three of those teams could lose, and it turns out that two of the three did lose, and I think lost surprisingly. But it's I just don't think we haven't watched a lot of Oklahoma here in the SEC, but I've watched them enough to know you just don't go into Norman and get a routine win. That's just not something that happens. Like that's a proud team. They got a lot of good players. And they were fighting for bowl eligibility. What else did Uncle Kenny say? He said, desperation is a tender track. It gets you every time.
It gets you every time. And it got Bama that week. That's right.
That's right. You play a desperate team, you better be ready to play. It's just like, all the analogies in the world, fighting a caged animal, all these kind of things that, those guys wanted to go to bowl games. They didn't want to get embarrassed by, like, people take pride in beating Alabama, the same as they do beating Georgia. It's probably would have been different if, even Missouri was coming into Norman that week. I think they probably would have had a better chance, but Oklahoma had decided that they weren't going to give anything up to Jalen Hurts, and they did not. Like that
or Jalen Milroe.
Or Jalen Milroe.
Yeah.
Not the first time that mistake's been made.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but
point of fact, they did not give up one single yard to Jalen Hurts that day.
They did not.
No.
So defense played really great.
But you kind of brought up a good point too. We got to remember the SEC didn't bring in Texas and Oklahoma because they're second-class citizens, right?
Right.
They brought them in because they're historic programs, and they come with that history, and they come with that winning edge. And
go look at the teams with the most all-time wins, and Texas and Oklahoma are in the top 10. I'm pretty sure,
yep.
if not the top 5. Those two teams win a lot of games, and so if they win a lot of games, they win a lot of games at home.
That's right.
So I wasn't really shocked at the outcome. I mean, if I was shocked about anything, I was shocked at how poorly the Tide played that week. It was not very good.
They were both
it was
top
a poor
6.
showing. Top 6, yeah.
Yeah, 5 and 6, Texas, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Tell us the top 6, because it'll just kind of show the fans of the show how many SEC teams are in the top 6.
You got Michigan at 1 and Ohio State at 2. So we're not starting off to a great start. Mm-hmm. Then you got Alabama at 3.
Which team at 3?
Alabama.
Oh, Alabama.
Yeah.
Okay.
Notre Dame at 4. Texas at 5. Oklahoma at 6. And then you got Penn State and Yale tied at 7. Nebraska at 9. Harvard at 10. And 11 is Georgia.
So there you go. One SEC team in the top 10. So Oklahoma's that's a proud team. They're not just going to roll over for you to come up to Norman, and they're not intimidated by the Crimson A or the Crimson numbers on the helmet, or the G. And those guys are not going to be intimidated by your jersey. So you got to win those games. And Alabama was not prepared to win that game, and it showed.
Yeah, they weren't. Jalen and Milroe and his small hands showed up, and like you said, we talked. We said earlier, man, when Milroe was on, man, it was pretty. It was beautiful. But when he was off, God, I mean, he was either a 10 or he was a 1. There was no in between, man, with that guy. And I don't think that's going to be any different when it comes to his NFL career either.
Yeah, I tend to doubt it too. Like you've got to be able to throw like the yardage is between like 8 and 15 in the NFL consistently. You got to be able to hit that throw, and Jalen was one of those guys. He could hit the long ones, and he could hit the little screens out of the backfield. But like throwing a little slant, like he had to work. He had a hard time getting that thing in the right spot on time. And those 5 to 8 yard out passes, like they were slow and late. And in that Oklahoma game specifically, he threw 2 picks trying to throw balls to the sideline. It was just in bad spots.
So, Chicken, have you gotten the stats up yet as far as what they're looking like this year and what they've lost?
So I do have that up, and I'm going through it, and I don't see that this is – I'm having to scratch my head, and I'm going to have to defer to Senior Chief because what I'm looking at does not look like anybody transferred out. I know that can't be right. I'm seeing a bunch of guys that have transferred in to Alabama, but I'm not seeing anybody that transferred out.
Well, they did lose some transfer players. There's a linebacker. They were all.
I know that Carolina got a linebacker, so that
linebacker. So
the site that I use has probably already refreshed itself to reflect, post spring. So they might not be showing who transferred out anymore, but.
Because they did lose. They lost players. So as far as starters goes, they lost. I think Justice Haynes. He was a starting tailback. I think he went to Michigan. Mm-hmm. But I don't really consider him a big loss. Like he didn't. I mean, he was good. We rated, I think, a 5-star coming out of high school. But he never had. He doesn't have breakaway speed. It doesn't seem. I mean, I don't know. I think he's replaceable. And then I think the biggest transfer they had this year that. I was sad to see was the linebacker that Carolina got, and I can't pronounce his name. It's Okrowangro or something like that. I've got it all wrong, but people were saying that as far as a raw talent goes, he's maybe the most athletic person that they've ever seen.
Right, true freshman, I believe, wasn't he?
Yeah, true freshman.
Yep.
From Germany, played his high school ball in Germany, so kind of went under the radar.
Yeah,
but he didn't get to play much this year, and I kind of think he figured that was going to follow him for the rest of his days, so he made a move, but I think he's going to be pretty good. Other than that, as far as transfers go, I'm not terribly disappointed with anybody that left because I kind of think that they were going to get beat out, or that the team was looking to replace them anyway.
It looks like they had 24 total guys. Bryson was able to get us a sheet up on that. 24 total that have either already.
I know Caleb Odom was he was a big receiver that ended up transferring to Mississippi.
So Justin Haynes, he left him and went to Michigan. Kobe Prentice, wide receiver. Devonta Smith, defensive back, has left and gone to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Jeremiah Alexander, defensive lineman, he's out. He's going to what I like to call Little Bama in Clemson. Jaleel Hurley, defensive back, going to Kansas. Kendrick Law may be the next Vander Griffgroff, as he's going to Kentucky. I can't say his name either.
I think is it.
Justin, as I like to call him, is going to South Carolina.
Right.
Damon Payne Jr. Headed to Michigan. Hunter Osborne, Jaheim Otis, Ty Lockwood.
He's a big loss. Jaheim Otis will be a big loss.
Okay, and I remember hearing the name Ty Lockwood last year. He's going to Boston College. He is a tight end. Yep.
Yeah.
Dylan Longeran, one of your quarterbacks, he's also going to Boston College.
He was number 4, so that makes sense that he left.
Right. Yeah, he was not going to see snaps there in Tuscaloosa.
No, he was done.
Keanu Coat.
Okay. He more or less got kicked off, so you can't really count him. He had some discipline issues.
Well, and he's headed to Sesame Street. Amari Jefferson. Ja'Shawn Ross.
Yeah.
Sterling Dixon. Emmanuel Henderson Jr.
Okay. Running back.
King Mack. Love the name.
Yeah.
King Mack. I don't know if he can play up to it, but he's going to Penn State. Caleb Odom going to Ole Miss. Dog, you'll love that. Jaron Hamilton. Naquil Bertrand.
Yep.
Miles McVay, Elijah Pritchett, and J.R. Gardner.
Yeah. So they had a few names in there that I'm remembering now. Like Caleb Odom was one that people had a lot of high hopes for, as 5-star receiver. He's supposed to be enormous, but he never really could crack the top rotation. So he moved on to Mississippi, and we'll see how that turns out for him. But none of the names you gave me, I don't think we're going to be world-class starters. They were going to be depth positions, so maybe they lose some depth there. But especially when you're talking about the receivers, you saw a lot of receivers transfer out. With the portal, I just don't think that you need as a team, any team, it's not just Bama, but with the portal, like there's so many receivers jumping that portal every year. If you have a guy leave, I think they're going to be highly replaceable.
Yeah.
And you can see that with Alabama's team this year. They got Isaiah Horton from Miami. Trying to think of.
You brought in 2 more tight ends, one from Mississippi State and one from Weber.
Starting to get into my forecast show, dog.
Sorry. I'm always ahead of myself. Yes, it does.
My microphone.
But we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I don't. With the transfers, there were some guys that as personal preference, I didn't want them to go, but I don't think it's going to have a huge impact. The transfer portal outgoing, at least, and they had some really good guys transfer in. But I can't talk about that, is what you're telling me.
I do want to ask this question, and this is a going forward type of a question. As we've said, the Dawg is anti-DeBoer. He doesn't believe that DeBoer is going to be successful in Alabama. And I happen to think that he's going to do just fine. I understand the dynamic of replacing a legendary, maybe the legendary coach in all of college football, Nick Saban. I've seen it up close and personal in a very much maligned and failed attempt at replacing Steve Spurrier at South Carolina with the dud Muschamp. But the way I see the DeBoer situation, the DeBoer hire, it's a different climate now in college football. DeBoer has proven himself to be a successful head coach, and he's proven himself in NIL and in the transfer portal. What do you think DeBoer's future looks like in Tuscaloosa?
So I guess it's kind of answering the question that we started answering earlier when we talked about the expectation going in and everything that had to happen for Bama's 2024 season. And with the exception of the Michigan game, which they clearly just weren't ready to play in, it was kind of an embarrassment. And the Oklahoma game, I think everything went as about as I thought would have happened. I thought they would have lost 2 games. I thought they would have made the playoff, which didn't happen, but they could have. That could have gone either way at the end there. And that being said, I think that's pretty good for a coaching change with that magnitude. Like you said, you're not replacing Muschamp. You're replacing Nick Saban, right? And so that comes with a lot of baggage, and I think he navigated it pretty well. And one thing that you'll probably see talked about a lot more this year is when he made that transfer, his offensive coordinator, a guy that he's traveled around with a lot, Ryan Groh, I think is his name, stayed in Seattle there to become the offensive coordinator of the Seattle Seahawks. Well, that didn't work out, and he has now moved, he and his family, to Tuscaloosa, and he will be the offensive coordinator. And they said it's going to make a huge difference. People are already talking after spring practice that the offense is completely different, playing with a different level of intensity, and he brings something to the coaching staff that's just different than what DeBoer had on his own. That they work better as a team, and so my expectation in 2025 is actually higher than it was in 2024, even with all the changes, the players that have left, players that are graduating. There's some names, I won't get too deep into them, that you're going to hear about this year. Keelan Russell, A.K. Deere, Isaac Taylor, just to name a few. Those are freshmen that you're going to know about within about 3 or 4 weeks of the season going by, and people are saying they're showing out down there in practice. And I know there's a lot of spring heroes that don't translate. But that being said, I think this guy's going to be around for a while. He seems to have the kind of the game figured out with the transfer portal, and I see you shaking your head. But so this is what I will tell all my Dawg friends out there, is that what you saw at the end of the Nick Saban tenure was there were some problems that come from being so successful and being so big, and I think Georgia has that problem now. Alabama had it before, but when you're a program like Alabama was and that Georgia is, your recruiting, though it seems like it's good, it's really not that good. Like they're not evaluating players to the same level. You have so much coaching turnover. You have so many players that are rated high that you start recruiting stars instead of recruiting players. And I think Georgia's in that situation now. That's why you have so many 5 stars come through Georgia and turn out to be nothing. Bama was in that same position. Like I can make a list at least 50 names long of 5-star players who came in for Nick Saban and then couldn't even crack the starting lineup. And if they did, it was for a game or two, and then they transferred again, and they wound up at Weber State where they were a second team player, right? So I think even with recruiting, really kind of identifying the players that fit your system and do well in that system, that you're going to see a little bit of a difference with the players that are coming in. I mean, on paper, Alabama had great recruiting classes all those years, but there was a lot of them that didn't turn out. And the same thing with Georgia now. There's a lot. I mean, you see that, we got 8 5-stars, and then 3 of them end up playing on the team after 2 years.
That's because they get locked up.
Well, you had to go
that's
there.
true. This is why I'm happy Bama's playing Georgia in September, because they'll still be suspended.
All right, Spurrier.
Or on work release.